2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to travel around to the campuses where I don't normally get to visit. Yes, all of you here at Perrysburg, you matter a lot, but it was awesome to be able to travel around and see so many of you at our different locations, and even more than that, was to see the 15 different individuals who gave, many of them for the very first time, a small talk on a proverb that makes our relationships more adventurous. Now, I get to see our staff on a regular basis, but I was blown away by the way in which they delivered the content that they had prepared. I had not heard a single talk before that weekend. Our campus pastors had really done a lot of the prep work to get them ready. And so I am humbled and honored to serve alongside of so many talented people. We asked 3 of them to come back from 3 different campuses last weekend to share that same message again with the whole church this time here on the Perrysburg platform. And I don't know what your take was and what your experience. I know some of you had to hear talks twice, but for me, as a leader and as someone who attends with my family, I get excited about the future. I get excited about what this means for my kids, and even though I don't think about it all the time, my grandkids down the road. What you got a taste of is the future leaders of our church, and so that is something to be excited about. In fact, for those of you that call Cedar Creek home, you financially invest, you got a picture of the leaders we're trying to equip for the future, and so I'm really honored, humbled to serve alongside of them. And if you haven't had a chance to look at them and say, way to go, thanks for doing that, I would love for you to just see them after the service and said, man, that was really cool to see and hear and learn from you that weekend. It was an adventurous way for us to share a little bit of our staff with you. And I'm excited to continue the conversation this weekend. Our bottom line, if you're looking at your notes for today, is this: there is more adventure for us when we are free to be spontaneous. That's the word that I want us thinking about. And you might not be thinking that's a biblical word, but I think hopefully by the end of our time, that will be your experience. What I want to do is I want you to think about most of human history, which is hard. We have to separate ourselves from the things that we're used to in our everyday life, like the weather. Most humans, believe it or not, especially for those of you that are 12 to 20, most humans did not have a Doppler radar in their hands everywhere they went to know what the weather was going to do. They had to look at something called the clouds, not the cloud where you keep your photos, but like the sky, and go, it looks like it's going to rain. So whenever they woke up in the morning, they would do things like watch their animals or watch spider webs to see if they built stronger webs. Those were early indicators that the weather there might be a weather change. But most humans had to plan it by ear. They couldn't plan out their week and their tasks. Sometimes their tasks were changed in the middle of it unexpectedly, spontaneously. Think about communication. For most humans in human history, they did not have a communication device that allowed them to talk with anybody in the world at any given time. No, they would show up, get this, uninvited to their friend's house. Like, hey, we're here. Those of you, I remember when I was a kid, we would show up and we would be like, we're just stopping by. To do that today seems like a criminal offense. It's like you don't show up uninvited. You text, then you text when you're in the driveway, I'm here, before you even get to the doorbell. Think about birth control. For most of human history, they were winging it. It's like, maybe, we don't know, it's like family planning. It's like God, and it's true. God is the giver of all life, but we're the ones that, think about it. We live in a day and time where we have technology and tools that allow us to live under the illusion of control. They should give us this feeling that we can be way more spontaneous. And what has happened? We feel more tethered to our devices and more bored and confined than potentially any other human era. And we have access to so much. What's happened? I think we've lost the art, the freedom to understand what it means to be free, to be spontaneous. And so I want to talk about that today. And here's where I want to begin. I want you to look at your own life. Are you too spontaneous or not spontaneous enough? How would you rate yourself? I mean, look at that scale that I put in your notes. I mean, are you somebody who tends to like organization and rhythm and routine, or do you like freedom and adventure? Are you a free spirit? Where would you put yourself? And just draw a little happy face for you. And if you came with someone or a couple of different people, then maybe put their initials where you think they are, and you can have fun talking about that after the service on your way home. No way, you're not that spontaneous, so this will be fun, right? I know for me, I am someone who tends to like more adventure in my life. I can be talked out of pretty much anything if you provide a more adventurous opportunity. So my brother-in-law and I, we get into a lot of troubles doing Tough Mudders and race car, lemons, adventures, video games, whatever it is. In fact, that's why when I go out to eat, I will look at the server and I will say, you can order me whatever you want from the menu. You don't have to ask. It doesn't even have to be on the menu. You don't have to ask me any questions. And I love the looks that I get back from, oh, I got you, to I have no idea what I'm doing right now, And so when I do that, for me, the adventure is in the surprise. It's in the spontaneous whatever it is that's going to show up. Some of you are sweating right now. You're like, I could never do that. We're on a recent trip. We were hanging out with some other churches who do multi-sites. And so I did this at this kind of local restaurant where we were at, and this is what they brought me. If you look down at the bottom of the bowl, you see an octopus, a little octopus down there. You see a crawfish up here. You see some mussel thingies, all sorts of. Some of you are like trying to hold back being sick. It's like, I just lost my appetite for the day. If you like seafood, then you're in. But I would have never picked that off of the menu. I like all of that stuff. They brought me one of their signature dishes, and it was a surprise. It was so much fun. And some people look at me and go, yeah, but you never know what you're going to get. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Until, just a couple weeks ago, I was walking into Five Guys Burgers and Fries, and I'm like, you know what, I'm kind of hungry I haven't been here in a while. So I looked at the woman behind the counter. She was really nice. I said, you can order me whatever you want from the menu. She's like, really? I said, yeah, you don't have to ask me any questions. She's like, what do you like? I said, no questions, just order. She's like, okay. So I get my bag, and I go out to the car, and I meet my wife, and I open up the bag, and I pulled out a grilled cheese. I didn't even know they had that on the menu. I was like, Five Guys Burgers and Fries, grilled cheese with pickles on it. And my wife goes, see, that's what you get for letting someone else order your food. It's like, it was still an adventure. It was an okay grilled cheese, but that's kind of what happens. Here's the challenge, though. If you're like me, sometimes we can end up living our lives a little bit distracted. If there's too much spontaneity in our life, if we're too impulsive, if we turn our life over to the demands and the requests and the opportunities that are before us all day, it's bird brain. You ever seen a bird look around? They never can look one place at the same time for very long. That's foolish. The Bible says that that's a foolish way to live. It's not being a good steward. The Bible talks over and over about how important it is to have good counsel and wise plans. So too much spontaneity, you end up losing. So for those of you that live on the other side of the kind of spectrum, you're shaking your head going, yep, that's why I'm not spontaneous. And believe it or not, I like routine too. I'm a little bit of both, and there are portions of my day, portions of my week where I love the rhythm that I get into. In fact, in the morning, some of you hit the ground running. I meander into my morning, and I have a routine that I like to follow where I read and have a cup of coffee and some of that stuff. And what happens is if that routine gets interrupted, even if it's a good thing, a good spontaneous interruption, I will fight back. You see, when we get committed to our routine, we end up pushing away spontaneous events, moments, opportunities, because they don't fit our schedule when that's supposed to come. And so the problem is, if we're not spontaneous enough, if there's too little spontaneity, it's a forceful way to live. It's inflexible. And so if you're taking notes, this is ultimately what healthy spontaneity is about. And it speaks to both groups. Healthy spontaneity is knowing when to surrender control. Healthy spontaneity is knowing when, and a key word there is when. Not too little, not too much, not too often, not impulsively, not restrictively. It's knowing when to open up our hand to the opportunity that's right in front of us. Because here's what I think I know is true about all of us. We all want some freedom in our life. We would all love to be free to walk out of work on a nice day and go play golf or go shopping. We would all love to be able to skip school whenever we want, to ditch the kids, to have a free afternoon of peace and quiet and me just thinking about me and not cheese, and then snack, and then wipe up, and then clean up, and then toys, and then bubbles, whatever. I'm sorry, it's getting a little therapeutic here for me, I see that. But spontaneity is learning when to surrender control. We all want freedom, but when a spontaneous opportunity comes along, typically we balk, even though we crave it. Because at the heart is we're afraid that if we surrender control, it's not going to go the way that we hope. So we need to learn how to surrender control of our expectations in these spontaneous moments. I'm not sure that it's going to be great. I'm not sure that it's going to work out. I'm not sure that it's going to be easy or fun, or that it's going to be safe. Sometimes we need to surrender control of our schedule. Well, I didn't put that in my calendar today. I'm supposed to be here today. You're supposed to be doing that right now. That's not the way that my routine works. Other times we need to surrender expectations of what other people think. Well, if I say no to their opportunity and their request, and that sounds like a fun adventure, what are they going to think of me? Ultimately, healthy spontaneity is learning when to surrender control of the outcome. And most humans in human history had to practice this on a daily basis. In fact, I believe that this is a spiritual principle, that if we follow Jesus, he's going to challenge you and I to live spontaneously with him, to surrender control and to trust him. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. In fact, I don't have anything else planned for the rest of the message. We're going to practice being spontaneous right now. I'm going to pick one of you. You're going to give me a passage, and I'm going to talk about it for the next few minutes. So I'm going to look around the room here. I know what's happening. Some of you are like, I just want to disappear right now. Don't look at me, don't look at me. And others of you are like, this is my moment. I've been waiting for this. I'm kidding. I've got a message we're going to talk about. I got a whole talk, but some people at campuses were even freaking out, and I'm not even in the room with them. They're like, please don't pick me, don't pick me, don't pick me. It's amazing. What I want to invite you to do is to take a deep breath with me, and the truth is you came in with some expectations and a schedule today, and I want you to surrender control of the next few minutes to him. I want you to open your heart and mind to what he wants to give you, where he may want to challenge you to be a little more spontaneous. So we give him permission to do that while I pray. God, thank you. Thank you for the people that are here and the opportunity for us to learn. And God, surrendering control. And I confess, I'm not very good at that sometimes. More than just sometimes. And so I end up missing opportunities to be spontaneous with you. And so God, as much as you're using this in my life, would you remind all of us that there is more adventure for us with you and for us with the people that we are close to when we are free to be spontaneous. Teach us how to get there and use me in any way that you can in the next few minutes. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to look at a story that was written by one of Jesus' disciples. His name was Matthew. It was also included in Mark, who was a friend of Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, account of Jesus' life. It was also included in Luke's account. He was a doctor who was given a research assignment by a wealthy Greek individual to collect the significant stories in Jesus' life. All three of them tell the story, and their details, some skeptics love to use the way that the details are a little bit different in each of these stories to prove that the Bible isn't accurate. And there's some reasons for some of that. But the overarching theme of the story is the same. And so I want to look at this story together. Mark, we're going to go to Mark's account. Mark chapter 6, verse 6. It says that Jesus went from village to village teaching the people. And so this is kind of context for what he's about to do next. Jesus lived in obscurity for about 30 years as a carpenter in Nazareth, small town. And at about the age of 30, he started traveling around teaching people what life with God was really like. We know the Sermon on the Mount today and the Beatitudes, it's fairly popular. But that was probably a common talk that he would give as he would travel from town to town, from synagogue, our equivalent of a church, synagogue to synagogue. He would say, hey, this is what life with God is like. And in that message was all sorts of invitations to be a little bit more spontaneous, to surrender control of some of the outcomes, love your enemies, bless those who persecute you, that kind of stuff. And on this particular day, and I believe it was early on in Jesus' public ministry, he gathered together a group of followers. These followers started to travel with him. They wanted to learn from him. They wanted to learn as much as they could from him. And this is what happened next. He called his 12 disciples. Matthew said that he gathered out of the followers 12 that were going to be his closest followers. That's what disciple means. He gathered his 12 disciples together and began sending them out 2 by 2, giving them authority to cast out evil spirits. The other accounts say that he gives them the authority to cast out evil spirits, and he tells them to begin sharing the same message that he has already shared with them. Jesus does this kind of allegedly spontaneous stuff all the time. All the time. He shows up while Peter and James and John are fishing, and he's like, drop your nets and follow me. And they're crazy. They do. They follow him. They leave their job, and it's like they spontaneously surrender control of the outcome and follow him. At another point in Jesus' time with his disciples, there's thousands of people, and he turns to his disciples and he says, feed everybody. And they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then spontaneously, loaves of bread and a fish show up, and they start feeding. At one point, it wasn't even with his disciples. He would meet other people. He would meet other people in his journey. Like one time, he met a wee little man named Andy Rechtenwald. It's a wee little man. Actually, his name was Zacchaeus, and he was climbing up in a tree because he couldn't see Jesus. And Jesus spontaneously looked at him and called him down, had lunch, and it changed his life. Jesus invites people into these, what looks like spontaneous moments all the time, but they are very intentional. Jesus remembers what we often forget, that you were created on purpose for a purpose. You're not an accident. Just let that sink in for a minute. You're not an accident. We were not created to just preside over a schedule and a few kids or a job. You have a purpose. And God's going to spontaneously, it's going to feel like spontaneously call us out into different opportunities to help us continue down the road of that purpose. And so Jesus is developing his disciples. He's giving them an experience where they grow in their faith and understanding of their influence and what they're capable of. We do this all the time through our weekend messages and through Growth Track, and also through an event every fall called the Leadership Summit. It's 2 days in your schedule where you're going to hear from world-class leaders, and God has used this event in my life personally in so many ways, helping me understand influence and purpose and God's dream. He's used it in the life of our church, and I would say whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you work construction, you're a VP of a company, I don't care where you're at, you carve those 2 days out of your schedule, and I believe God will show up and help expand your view of your life. And so we encourage people to come back and join us every single year at that event. You can find more information on the back of your notes. Jesus would do this sort of thing with his disciples all of the time, invite them into some challenge, but you may not have noticed this. He does something really peculiar in this instance. He tells them to take nothing for their journey except a walking stick. Thanks, a walking stick. Don't take food, no traveler's bag, no money. He allowed them to wear sandals, but do not take a change of clothes. This seems really obscure, doesn't it? It seems strange. Jesus is going to send them out, and then he gives them inconvenient assignments. No food, no traveler's bag, which is like a suitcase, an overnight bag, a backpack with extra supplies, like toothbrush and toothpaste, which I never want to leave home without. And then no money. You see, I can do without the first two as long as I have my debit card, because I can go to Walmart or wherever and pick up the supplies that I need. But it's like he's telling them to, what? Surrender control. Surrender some of the things that we kind of depend on. Because when spontaneous opportunities come up, we allow food and traveler's bag and money to be reasons why we can say no. What does food represent? If you're taking notes, food represents when we say, I don't really have the energy. An opportunity comes along to do something spontaneous, to help someone, to invest in someone's life, to connect with God in a unique way, or to step out and serve or connect, do more, give back, and we say, I just don't really feel like it. I mean, sometimes this happens for me as a parent. It feels like I tell my kids no all the time because they constantly ask over and over and over again. And the other day they were asking to do something. They're out of school, and they're like, hey, Dad, can we go do this? And I said, no, not right now. One of my kids looked at me and said, well, why? Now, I wanted to say, don't ask me that. But I started thinking about it, and the only answer I could come up with is, I don't really have the energy to do that. In other words, I'm saying no to an adventurous opportunity with my kids because I don't feel like it. How many times am I saying no to them? How many times are we saying no to the people around us because we would just rather sit at home and watch Netflix? Or to God? Imagine if the disciples would have been like, I don't really have the energy, Jesus. I don't really feel like it. I think sometimes we miss some adventure that God has for us. And he wants us to surrender some of that control, to surrender that expectation that we may not have the energy. The second thing that he's going to want us to surrender at times is the traveler's bag. That's when we say, I don't really feel prepared. I don't know that I have everything. We turn down great opportunities. We say that we'll do that someday, and someday never comes. I'll do that when I feel more prepared. I'll lead a group. I'll step out. I'll do a little bit more. I'll get a little bit more involved when I feel a little bit more equipped. You know, as a church, we want to come alongside and help you feel equipped, but you're never going to feel ready. You're never going to feel finally ready to be married, to have a kid. But there are other things that we just allow into our schedule. No problem, because, you know, whatever. But with God, it's like we need the stars to align just right, and we end up missing opportunities. Another thing that we allow to restrict spontaneous opportunities is the money. It's when we say, I don't have the resources. God invites us to give, to serve, to share some of the time, because that's a resource. Some of the talent, that's a resource that God's given us, and some of the treasure. We're just like, I just don't have enough. And what Jesus is doing with his disciples is the same thing he's going to do with us. He's going to invite us into a place where he wants to use us. He wants to connect with us. And he's going to say, hey, surrender the outcome. Surrender these things. And trust me. And that's ultimately the challenge. You see, our concern is that if we surrender those things, do we really trust that he is good? That he will never let us down? Or do we feel like we need to hold on to our life because we know what's best? I know that's where I struggle. What's fascinating is Jesus doesn't even stop here. Look at what he says next. He goes, wherever you go, stay in the same house until you leave town. Now, you got to remember, these are men who have spent their life working for themselves. They've got their own fishing business. They're hardworking. They've got their dignity. They want a good reputation. And now they're going to show up to a town with nothing to offer, and they're going to have to beg. They're going to have to ask. In other words, they're going to have to depend upon God and other people. Yes, that's what relationship is. And I think in our day and time, we have lost sight of what it means to lean into and to depend on, to open up our lives to the people around us. Wherever you travel, depend upon, find someone around you that you have to depend upon. I'm not saying leech off of, but it's like we build these independent lives where we're not dependent upon anybody, and therefore we're not connected with anyone either. And so these disciples have to go out, and they have to go to people they've never met before, because there's more adventure for us when we're free to be spontaneous, when we're free to surrender control and depend upon others in a new way, to depend upon God in a new way. So I imagine if I'm one of the disciples at this point, I'm hearing, okay, well then this is going to be successful, right? You've had success wherever you've gone, right? The people are going to welcome us, right? And here's what he says next. If anyone refuses to welcome you or listen to you, what? People might not want us? People might refuse to welcome us? You mean they might not give us food? We're going to go with no food, and then people might not provide. This isn't going to be safe. This isn't going to be easy. This isn't going to be convenient. He goes, if any place refuses to welcome you or listen to you, shake its dust from your feet as you leave to show that you've abandoned those people to their fate. I love that phrase, shake the dust. Because I think sometimes the reason I'm not spontaneous is because I had an event that happened in the past, and I'm still holding on to the dust. I had something inconvenient. Somebody did not welcome me. Somebody refused to listen. It didn't go the way that I had expected. And I allowed that one event in the past, that one group, that one serving opportunity, that one church, that one Christian, that one person to cling to me into the future, to give me permission to say no. And what Jesus is saying is, don't let that moment keep you from saying a spontaneous yes to me. Don't let that moment hold you back from stepping out and surrendering control when it's appropriate. It's powerful. It's a powerful invitation and a challenge for you and me, because we all crave spontaneity in our life. But when it comes down to it, it means that we have to learn how to shake the dust and surrender control and to open ourselves up to the unknown with God. G.K. Chesterton, a popular author, one of my favorite quotes that challenges me. It challenges me because I feel inconvenienced all the time. He says this: "An inconvenience is only an adventure, wrongly considered." I'll say that again. An inconvenience is really only an adventure considered wrongly. An adventure is an inconvenience rightly considered. So the next time you feel inconvenienced, the next time a spontaneous invitation comes your way, would you consider opening your heart and seeing it as an adventure? Because there is more adventure for us with the people that we love, with God himself, when we are free to be spontaneous. Why does Jesus do this? I mean, ultimately, how does this help our relationships grow? Because Jesus understood this fundamental principle that's true for all of us. Love grows when we share things in common. And so if you want to love and experience love with the people around you and with God, do you know what the key is? Have common experiences. That's why when you're walking through the mall or the hallway or the school and you see somebody else with a Cavs shirt, you may have never met them before, but you feel a kindred connection with them. Come on, Cavs, win game 2. And when you see somebody with a Golden State shirt on, bad words begin to form in my head that I really have to hold back to not let out. I want to throw something at them. It's like an enemy right there. And they may be a really nice person, but that's just kind of the way it goes. Jesus understood this. Jesus wanted his followers to have common experiences with him. Jesus wanted his followers to have this common experience of going out and sharing the message and dealing with people, welcoming him and refusing him. He wanted that, and he wants the same for you and me. He wants us to have those shared experiences, that shared connection with him. That's why you are created with a purpose. And he also wants us to have that with each other as well. That's why he sent them out 2 by 2, so that the 2 of them together would have a shared experience. I don't know how well the disciples knew each other. And so they were sent out to have these shared experiences with each other, to begin to build a relationship. Imagine what it was like to be picked to go with Matthew, the tax collector. I mean, nobody likes tax collectors in Israel. And it's like, we're not going to be welcome anywhere. I got Matthew on my team. This is going to be miserable, I imagine that whoever got picked to go with Judas was like, there's something off about this guy. I just can't put my finger on it, but something shady's going on, It's like Peter, he's always sticking his foot in his mouth. And sometimes, what we do is we look at the people that God has put around us and we're like, ah. And maybe the more common experiences you have, whether you love them or not, whether that's learning how to play video games with your kids or serve together somewhere else or say yes to an opportunity at a life-giving church, when you share those experiences, your relationship with God and with each other grows. So when did the adventure begin for the disciples? When Jesus was talking and teaching them? No. Here's where the adventure began. The disciples went, and they told everyone they met to repent of their sins and to turn to God. That's when the adventure began. And do you know the result? A few verses later, it says the apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told him all that they had done and taught. Another passage says they came back full of joy, that there was adventure, there was connection with each other and with God. And I'm sure that it wasn't all success stories, but they came back like little kids telling show and tell stories. Jesus, you won't believe what happened. It was an adventure. This happened, and then we saw this, and I can't believe it. This person was healed, and this person was changed, and they said yes, and they said no, and they pushed us out of town, and you should have seen us shaking the dust off of our feet the whole way to the next town, Question that I want to ask you is, are you free to be spontaneous? If Jesus were to show up today, what would you say to him? I don't know if I have the energy for that. I don't feel prepared. Someday, I don't have the resources. When my schedule clears up and things get a little bit easier, what if you're missing an opportunity to connect, an invitation from God, A smiling invitation, not a shame-filled bully, not manipulation, but an invitation to connect with him. Because you're saying yes somewhere. You're saying yes everywhere else, but not where we should be free to be spontaneous. And so here are a few guiding questions that help me. Hopefully they help you. First question is this: who? Who are the people that you want to be spontaneously available for? Do you want to be spontaneously available for God? Let's clarify that. Maybe it's kids, grandkids. Maybe it's your brother, your sister, or a close friend. Maybe there's somebody that God has put in your life that you have a passion or a burden for that you want to help. Let's just clarify who those people are, because when we're clear about that, that helps us answer or guide us in this next question: where can I say no so that I am free to give a spontaneous yes? Where do I need to say no? You know what I found in my life? Sometimes it's easier for me to say yes to everybody else. And what that restricts is my ability to say a spontaneous yes to the kids or the people that I'm closest to. Sometimes that means I need to say no to opportunities that I love, to conferences and trips and serving on committees in our community. I love that stuff. I love going to local events, but I love my kids more. And man, that means I disappoint people. That means I'm not always available for what they want, but if I'm going to have that availability to say a spontaneous yes for my kids, we can't max out our schedules to say yes to everybody. Where is it that you can say no? Maybe not no forever, but no today, to be available for that spontaneous yes. And the third question is this: what is God inviting you to spontaneously step into? Because he has an adventure for you. You were made on purpose, for a purpose. You're not a mistake. So don't put it off. Instead, learn how to say yes to him. And sometimes the best way to say yes and to understand that more is to say yes to deeper connections within a life-giving church. I hope that's here at Cedar Creek. We sat down with a few people who have recently taken that kind of step into group life, because groups are a way that you can sit around the table and talk with others. You can learn together. You can share your struggles together. And it's intimidating, I understand, but I want you to listen to how this step has helped them. Let's watch.
I had heard about Cedar Creek from my aunt. I knew that it was younger, it was more eclectic people, and that it had really good music, so I decided to come.
Felt like I was missing something, and I had heard about Cedar Creek. I had some friends that had gone there and had told me about it, and it was a different experience than anything I had ever experienced before. So I came to a point where I couldn't not go. I wanted to be there every Sunday.
I actually was introduced to Cedar Creek by Tracy, and she had asked me. I would always say, oh, maybe some other time. And then one time I thought, why do I keep saying no? And I said yes. And it was like no church that I'd ever been to.
So I went every Sunday, and then I started volunteering. I really wanted to join a group, but my life, my schedules and everything, the time just wasn't right. The timing wasn't right. So
I've been going for about 1.5 years. I felt like I needed more. Like, I knew I had been going through a lot of stuff, like my mom was sick, and I knew that God was putting on my heart to go a little deeper and really to get more involved.
Well, it wasn't that I wasn't interested in groups. I was interested in groups. I would hear about them. I would see things during the message about them. But I wasn't sure where I fit, to be perfectly honest with you. So that's kind of what made me hesitate. But then there was Growth Track, and I thought, well, we can do that. And at the end of Growth Track, there was the opportunity to join this group, and so I did. And it's been everything that people talked about groups being, I found here. It is absolutely, it changes you, it does. And in ways that you don't think it's gonna change you.
After going through Growth Track, I was invited to come to a group, and I thought, well, why not? My kids are all grown. I have a lot of free time, so. This group is a lot of fun. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of new people, and the neat thing about it is When I go to church on Sunday or rare Saturday night, I see somebody that I know and I can say hi. And we, hey, how are you doing? And that's really kind of cool to be able to connect to people that way. If you aren't sure about the time, if it's not right, just keep it in the back of your mind. Don't totally discount it, because you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot about yourself. You'll learn a lot about other people. It just makes things a little bit clearer, I think. If you have some questions or confusions, it's nice to sit in a group of people and bounce ideas off of each other.
It's been a very great experience. I believe that I've gotten a lot closer to God. My faith journey has really, I have a deeper understanding of truly the foundation of faith.
Don't hesitate to join. If you don't think that you're going to fit in someplace, you will. You absolutely will. And it's an amazing thing to do. And it is, I don't think you'll ever regret it. So do it.
When I first came to Cedar Creek as a 19-year-old, I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, just last year? Thanks. It's true. I was a 19-year-old in college because someone said yes to the spontaneous opportunity to invite me. They had the courage to do that. Then somebody invited me into their group before I ever came to a service. And it was that group that welcomed me, and then I came to a service, and an opportunity came along to serve. And so I said, okay, I'm in. Rapping chords for the band. And out of those relationships, other opportunities opened up. One discovery was that I found that there was no group for University of Toledo students where I was attending. And so I could have sat there and been like, well, aren't you guys going to provide a group for me? But instead, I just felt this nudge. And so I said, I don't know that I'm prepared, but I'll help. Because that's what I saw people doing all around me. I had no idea that God was going to use some of those events in my life 15, 16 years later to prepare me for this. You have no idea the journey that God has for you, the purpose that God has for you, and you will miss it if you're not free to be spontaneous with Him. And so this summer, you know what the temptation for all of us is? It's to drift our schedules away to the lake house and trips and sitting in the backyard, and I love all of those things. I think this summer we have an opportunity to invest some of our time in relationships with each other, to step into group life, to find others here that you're going to connect with. There are some of you, it's time for you to step up and lead, and you're thinking, but Ben, I don't feel prepared. I know, Jesus said to the guys, don't take a traveler's bag. Trust Him. We'll actually come alongside of you and help you get prepared. Maybe for others of you, you just need to make it your goal this summer to finish Growth Track so that you can have the same common language and understand how we talk about the spiritual journey and how you can help someone else grow. Why? Because I believe God has a dream for Northwest Ohio and beyond. And that dream is for marriages to be vibrant and whole, and families to be healthy and not broken, for kids to be raised up and equipped for life on their own, for a community to have a heartbeat of help and hope for every person. And that's not something that God sent one person to do or a few staff members. I believe He has put you here to join us in that dream. That He's looking at you and I today and He's going, hey, here's an opportunity to go on an adventure with me, to have a shared experience, to be a difference maker. And so let's not let our excuses and our restricting concerns keep us. Let's be free to give a spontaneous yes to Him. Because at the end of the day, I think one of the reasons we struggle to open up our hands is we forget how good He is and that He'll never let us down. And so we're going to make that our reminder and our prayer today. Let's say yes to those invitations to step into a group, to maybe lead a group, to do growth track, to reach out to someone and invest in their life who doesn't go to church, to use this summer to prepare us for another ministry season that'll kick up in the fall ahead. Will you make that your prayer with me? God, thank you that you bring us to these places where you want to help us take a step with you. And what that step means is opening up our hands on the things that we try to control. So God, when we don't feel like we have the energy, and when we don't always feel like we're prepared, and when we don't feel like we have the resources, when we're going to have to depend upon you and maybe even others, God, will you give us the courage to give a spontaneous yes? And God, there are going to be times where we have to shake the dust when things don't go the way that we want. And so help us do that. We want to be used by you to make a difference right here in the place that we call home. Thank you for inviting us into that journey. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks.